And now, please welcome from Transportation at Bloomberg Associates, Andrew Wiley Schwartz, from Cultural Assets Management at Bloomberg Associates, Tracy Knuckles, and Chief of Staff and Head of Operation at Bloomberg Associates, Ernesto Frere, with Senior Fellow at the Kresge Foundation, Jennifer Bradley.
Thanks, everybody, for that warm welcome. I am delighted to be here to talk about, as George said, what's been the learning over the last decade of Bloomberg Associates. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about their work is how they help mayors and mayoral administrations hold the several tensions that I think mayors are subjected to. One that comes immediately to mind is each mayor wants desperately to learn from other mayors, how have they solved this problem? How do they address this common challenge? But mayors also feel that their own situation is really very specific. They have particular relationships with higher level governments or with their city council or with the certain politics of the realm. And so I am excited to hear how Bloomberg Associates has helped cities kind of thread that particular needle. And the first thing I want to talk about is setting priorities, right? Every mayor comes into office with a huge appetite, a big agenda. They come to conferences like CityLab. They talk to folks like my colleagues at Kresge, and they think, there's so many amazing things that I'm called to do, and they can't do it all. So Tracy, how do you help mayors sort of prioritize?
Well, I agree with you. Mayors always come in with lots of good ideas, which is great and exciting. But unless a mayor is able to bring their priorities into just a few things, the administrations can't be successful in taking things forward. So while you may be doing long-term plans for your city around sustainability or economic development that could be 4 years, 8 years, 30 years, without a few key priorities that are translating to your staff to get things done, nothing gets done. So for instance, when we worked in Los Angeles, one of our very early engagements, then Mayor Garcetti was able to bring key priorities in the areas of transportation and arts and culture, which is my bailiwick, to bring the things about livability, sustainability, a prosperous city, a well-run city, and making those agencies bring forth strategic plans that could be 18, 24 months to get things done so that citizens in that city could see those things come to fruition within the first part of his first term.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I would jump in here and say, by way of anecdote, one of the first mayors we ever met with, and he'll remain nameless for this exercise, we asked him what his priorities were. And about 5 minutes later, he had essentially just named every single function of city government. And we just sort of looked at him and be like, well, you're gonna have a lot of problems on your hands if you're trying to get your top senior staff to focus on a few things. It doesn't mean that you leave other things at the table. You actually have to deliver on all these functions. But where are you as a mayor putting your political capital, both internally and externally? Where are you putting your muscle? Where are you putting pressure on your staff to deliver? And if you tell them 50 things, it's really tough for them to figure out how to prioritize. And so trying to hone your focus, it does not mean you're leaving things behind. It doesn't mean that those are your priorities forever and ever, but it helps be a guiding post for you, and more importantly, it really helps your staff.
I think staff really is so important here because we talk to staff in transportation, every day there are fires all over the place, stop signs and traffic lights, and elected officials are calling and they know who to call in the department. And it's just as important for staff to understand that they can say, this is a priority of my mayor, as it is for the staff to say, that's important, but we're not going to do that right now because this other thing is more important to our mayor. And if they know that you have their back when you say that, that's incredibly empowering because they're all getting pulled in so many directions.
When you think about some of the things that mayors focus on, a lot of them talk about the assets of their cities, right? And I think that a lot of the most exciting conversations that are going on in cities is where mayors recognize we don't need to be the next whatever, we are great in these ways. So how do you strengthen that desire to sort of look at where you are and the great things that your city has at the moment? Ernesto?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I'm a storyteller, I guess, so I'm going to tell another anecdote. We were walking around once with the mayor in his downtown area, and all he was doing was pointing out the problems. Oh my God, look at that graffiti. I can't believe that illegally parked car. And you could see him almost in tears at the state of it. And we, who had never been there and looked around, and be like, is that a fish market? That's really cool. Or what about that public park over there? A lot of people go there? And he's like, well, yeah, that's a big fountain. A lot of people gather there. We're like, these are assets that you should be selling. Sometimes it can take an outsider that sheds a light on that. But these are important. And I think mayors, sometimes you get so wrapped up in what is of the moment, what people are talking about, what you're seeing in the news, and frankly, the pressures of the job. I have to fix this, this, and this. There's not a lot of time to sort of catch your breath and look at the positive side of things. But they are there. And opening your eyes a little bit, doing a little crowdsourcing, whether it's from externals or even your internal staff, and saying, what do we have to offer that makes us unique, can be the building block for a huge program.
Andy,
One
what's
thing
your
that-
largest public asset as a mayor?
Yeah, well, you sort of served it up to me because I'm excited to answer. One thing that every city has is their streets, and mayors and city staff should all recognize right away that that's 80% of the public land that you have direct control over. And so you can do lots of different things with that property. We've dedicated it for the last almost century to a single use, and the pandemic taught us a lot about how flexible and useful our streets can be in lots of different ways. We had morgues on our streets, we had classrooms on our streets, we've had voting booths on our streets. And our streets are really flexible, and they can be used in different ways for different purposes, and they don't always have to carry cars and trucks. They do always have to provide access to a certain extent, but they can do that in lots of different ways. And so we encourage cities to look at their streets more flexibly and understand how they can be flexed to do different things and deliver a lot of economic and social benefits.
Tracy, do you want to talk about, because arts are such a great force in every city for
Absolutely.
creativity and goodness.
I do think some cities make this mistake of thinking they have to have major institutions to have an arts and culture sector, that we have to have a museum, that we have to have a theater, that we have to have big grand public spaces like you might have in larger cities. But sometimes what's right in front of you and what your locals know about is sort of the richest arts and culture offer that you will have, and it's just about understanding and elevating and creating a platform for that local culture to be featured. I mean, even in Athens, Greece, which I'm sure you think of as a place for antiquities and history, and maybe you've been there on vacation and it's a great tourism draw. But when we worked in Athens, we said, put the Parthenon aside for a minute. Let's talk about what else you have to offer. And it was about helping them create a network of cultural institutions that really elevated contemporary culture. What's happening in Athens now? What's been created in the last 5 to 10 years that's interesting to people, that will make Athens a destination, not just a place where you catch your plane to the islands for the weekend. So even if you're not in Athens, even if you're in a small or mid-sized city, what is rich about your city culturally? Maybe it's ethnically specific. Maybe it's about what local people eat. Maybe it's where you get your hair braided. I mean, there is really rich arts and culture in every place. And it's about thinking new about what you need to promote that. Maybe they need a way to get together. Maybe those artists and cultural organizations need a platform to talk to you as mayor so you can better understand what they need and where they want to go.
And that Athens project was actually a great handoff. Not only did the culture team get them set up and sort of really focus on their modern and modernity, but then we then turned that over to our tourism team, who then worked with Aegean Airlines and the airport to create an entire campaign targeting modern Athens to Europe. And you saw hotel occupancies went up, length of stay went up, visitation was breaking records, because everybody had on their list, I will get to the Parthenon someday. But they didn't have on their list, I need to go now. And suddenly it was, I want to go for that incredible World Book Fair. I need to go for that incredible concert. So it was a huge turning point, I think, in their tourism promotion.
Tracy, I want to pick up on one of the things you said, which is that mayors could be listening to artists. And on my cheat sheet, which Ernesto told me not to read from, I'm going to read this. It says, stop obsessing over your press release. Use the other tools in your toolbox. So talk to me a little bit, Ernesto, about how mayors can kind of engage community and listen and get their message out in ways other than the sort of broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, community engagement. I think we've all sort of heard bits and pieces of it today. These guys can really dive into specific programs, but I would just say one of the things we always talk about is like, just imagine all of you guys. When's the last time you sat around the table with your friends and family and somebody said, did you read that press release that Coca-Cola put out? It really doesn't happen, but the amount of anxiety and agita that goes into this at City Hall, and if you think about it, what is it? A press release is a tool with which you are trying to get a third party to write your story, a third party that's probably incentivized to poke holes in it and try to find another reason to tell something different. And so why not, to borrow a marketing term, just go more direct to consumer? You have so many opportunities in so many creative ways, and cities are really coming up with really cool ways to do it. And one of our favorites is Mayor Baraka in Newark. He literally has a roving city hall that he gets in, it can expand, he takes meetings there, he goes out to neighborhoods, and that's where he's having his day. That is where he is. People feel his presence. He's not relying on the press to tell his story and grab a photo op when he's somewhere. He's going right to the residents. And the proof was in the pudding in terms of his elections and his results and the support he gets. But getting creative about your community engagement and thinking about other channels other than trying to hope that a reporter tells a good story about you is probably the most effective way right now of getting your programs acknowledged.
I have an arts anecdote, I'm sorry. Mayor Baraka is an artist himself. Not everybody's lucky enough to have an artist as a mayor, but participatory arts experiences in cities go a long way. If you're a mayor and you want to participate in community, I am certain there is an artist or an arts and cultural organization that will engage you and have you be a part of a community activity. It's gone a long way in Newark. And if you are meeting with your creative community, you are touching a lot of people. People that care about education, about healthcare, about community. Artists are very activist citizens, and it's a meaningful way to engage with that community in their area of expertise, but also across policy areas.
Transportation touches everybody, Andy. So how do people engage in transportation planning?
Well, every single city citizen is a transportation engineer. I don't know if you knew that. And they all know exactly how the lights should be timed,
They do,
the lanes there
indeed.
should be. But seriously, it does. It touches everybody. And I think that one thing that we've noticed in terms of taking your message is making sure that when you're doing something for the benefit of the public, let's say, for example, you're redesigning a long traffic corridor, and you want to make it safer, maybe you want bike lanes, or you want to narrow the lanes, plant a median, whatever it is, to make it safer. There may be 5, 8, 10 schools along that corridor. Those principals and those PTAs should not only be engaged in the process, but then stand up for you and speak for you so that the press isn't just covering what you think you should be saying as a mayor or as a city hall, but they're actually hearing from the public, from your champions. And so I think that's incredibly important, and I think it's something that sometimes city halls miss.
One final one on that, just to flag, was I thought just a little quick hitter that I thought would be great. The city of Oakland was trying to get a lot more people engaged in their parks and some of their events, and they couldn't break. The press wasn't interested in covering it. They weren't getting much interaction in social media. Nobody was paying attention to their emails, so they said, what do we do? And they actually put their events calendar in their water bill. And then suddenly they started seeing people showing up. Because guess what? Every household, whether you're on social media or not, you got to pay your water bill. And so it was just a really creative way of thinking about what are our touch points with our residents that let's think outside the box. And just one little slip, and all of a sudden their Lake Merritt was full of people.
That's great. I wish we could talk about this all day. We are winding down, and I was struck by when the previous mayoral panel was here, they spoke very movingly of the shoulders upon which they stood as mayors and the legacy that they hoped to leave. While it may feel like every day in office is 100 years long for a mayor, most administrations go by very quickly, particularly in term-limited situations. So what have you learned about how mayors can sort of secure their legacy and make sure that the good that they've done lives after them, as Shakespeare said?
You've got a great
I'll do this one.
Pull out another story for us.
I mean, I think Candace Moore was here. I don't know if she's still in this room, but Chicago was quite amazing. There she is. So Mayor Lightfoot brought Candace on to be the first chief equity officer and created the first equity office. But this was just something Mayor Lightfoot wanted to do as a priority for her administration. I'm guessing that you guys maybe have heard about Chicago politics and get a little hairy every now and then. So when we were working with Candace, she was working with our social services team to build out and think about how do you create a really robust equity platform for the city that is cross-cutting, right? A lot of people make the mistake of just creating a chief equity officer and it's a vertical, and sanitation and transportation, nobody else has to worry about it. And they want to be really intentional about that. So they were trying to oblige, and they got everybody to buy in to create annual plans. And then Candace had the right idea that, like, wait a minute, one day Mayor Lightfoot, who's a champion of this, may leave, and we don't know who may come back. And so how do we solidify this? And well, we said, hey, you know what? We worked with Atlanta once, and they were facing the same issue with their office, and they codified it into the city charter. And so Chicago pushed out legislation that codified not only the office, but the chief equity officer position, and made it mandated that every city agency now, every year, had to deliver an equity plan with true KPIs. They're tracking the impact of it. I think the report was released just last week. And you're talking about, this is something that was long overlooked, that could easily have been washed away. Unfortunately, Mayor Lightfoot did move on. There's a new administration in place, but that office is there, and it's sustaining because they took that extra step. And so I would implore all of you mayors to realize that your legacies and your programs are important, and they can live on without you, but you got to start planning for it now, because you never know when that day is going to rush up on you, and suddenly it just gets whisked away when the next administration comes on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a certain element of having to give your legacy idea away, of giving it to citizens, of giving it so that the demand remains there when you leave. And we did in New York with Jeanette Sadeghian and Mike Bloomberg a public plaza initiative that we've then brought to a couple of other cities, and it's application driven. So neighborhoods apply to the city to create these spaces in their neighborhoods. And it's survived, these programs have survived successive mayoral administrations, because if a mayor comes in and she says, you know, look, this wasn't my idea, I don't know if we want to do this anymore, there's this wave of support from other elected officials and community folks who really want that program to live on.
It speaks to the value of partnerships and building partnerships while you're in office. I mean, Mayor Bass from LA said this morning that she inherited the Los Angeles Mayor's Fund, which we helped consult on at the beginnings of Bloomberg Associates. But it goes to show you that an entity that lives outside of government, that has relationships with local philanthropy and the corporate sector, can be an avenue to advance policy. And, you know, even as LA continues to struggle with homelessness, there is a vehicle that is sort of plug and play and ready to go. So even if you are considering changes that you think may live on, perhaps there's infrastructure, and I mean infrastructure within your office. You know, maybe you need to create a department that does not exist. Maybe you're building a position that does not yet exist, but it's so important for the policy priority that it has to happen, be it a chief heat officer or a chief transportation officer or a head of arts and culture. I mean, you shouldn't be afraid of making that structural change and building partnerships that can live on beyond your tenure as mayor.
Great. I think that is a fabulous note to end on. And we all look forward, I think, to helping mayors and being the mayors who are in these partnerships to make cities the fantastic places that we all know them to be. So thank you.